Hey everybody, on this episode of AFTERBUZZ TV Spotlight On, we're getting up close and personal with the host of AV Club TV show, John Teti. Let's do it.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Oh, listen to that. The theme for Batman 66 playing us into this episode of AFTERBUZZ TV Spotlight On. This is the show where we get up close and personal with the people responsible for bringing you all that great entertainment you get to see, whether it's on your TV sets, on your mobile streaming devices, anywhere you can find that entertainment, they bring it to you.
In the elevator.
On the elevator too, at the gas station, absolutely. Yes, while you're doing that.
That's a good one.
I'm your host, Frank Moran. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HappyGoJackie. My host, my host today, my guest is a host today. He's also a writer and producer. He's worked for The Daily Show, but he's gone over to the AV Club, and now he's the host of their TV show on Fusion, which airs Thursday nights. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big warm welcome to John Teti.
Please, I can feel the waves of welcome coming over the internet.
There you go, yes, basking over you.
Weren't you so sad to hear about Adam West?
I was. It's just like, I feel like I feel about him the same way I feel about when William Shatner passed.
Oh, yes. Now, both people who became famous for these roles from the 60s and owned it. Mm-hmm. You know, they didn't distance themselves. They didn't, they weren't always trying to turn the page. They went on and they had successful careers, but they were proud of what they had done. And that's why I loved Adam West. Like, he owned the fact that he was the campy Batman, and he was kind to fans, and he really embraced that part of his persona.
Now, in your travels, have you ever had the chance to meet Adam West?
I never got the chance to meet him, and I had that thought immediately when I heard on the radio the other night that he had died, that I never got the chance to at least shake hands with him.
I had met him only twice. Me and Adam West.
You're beating me.
One time was in a Target in Orlando, Florida, where he was there, back in the late 90s. He was just doing a little appearance at a Target.
Oh, it wasn't an appearance, though. You didn't just see him shopping at Target.
It was like, hey, Adam West is going to be here at this Target. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to go see this.
What was he promoting at Target?
I don't know what he was promoting at Target, but it was a chance to see Adam West up close and in person. So all right, let's do it.
Who cares? Yeah.
And then the other time was at a comic book shop in here. There was a big salute to Batman 66 when DC was got the rights and they started they released the whole big box set.
I forgot about that. And they weren't they doing a comic for a little while?
Yes.
Too? Is that still going?
Now they kind of just do like a series of like miniseries.
I like those.
Yeah, where they'll team them up with either like they just finished up the teaming up with Wonder Woman 77, the Linda Carter Wonder Woman.
Oh, cool. They've
done a Man from U.N.C.L.E., the Avengers.
Really?
Yeah, the Avengers TV show.
I like a miniseries. It's low commitment.
Yes.
You know? You can jump right in, and then a few months later, you're done.
Which I like that, and then but I also feel sometimes with miniseries that sometimes it doesn't matter. Like it's a less than story where I feel like, okay, you're giving this to an up and coming writer, and maybe it just doesn't mean as much.
Disposable.
Yes.
Huh. Okay, yeah. I can see that too. Well, I hate miniseries now.
Oh no, John, no! I didn't know my intention. No! The power of my words. So, John, Adam West is fantastic, but we're here to talk about you.
Okay, fair enough.
So, originally from New Hampshire.
That's right.
Now, so certainly for the AV Club, it's all about pop culture, embracing that, some critical thinking about that, which you don't often get to see. It's more just maybe lampooning and spoofing, but giving it the attention that it and thought that it deserves. But is that something that you just grew up with? You were just a major consumer?
Well, it's funny that you bring up that I was from New Hampshire, because I think that's a big part of how I ended up involved with the AV Club and ended up really loving the AV Club because... and I was in rural New Hampshire. Like, I wasn't even in any of the big city New Hampshire. Oh, here's a fellow bringing me some coffee.
Oh, look at that.
What's happening right now?
None for me? Wow. I know who's the star in this interview. It saddens me.
Okay, I've got coffee now. But growing up in rural New Hampshire, like, I didn't have access to a lot of cultural events, so my experience of the world was so much through TV, and I was obsessed with TV from an early age, and I think that it helped me acquire a certain media literacy, so that when I was grown up, I sort of like knew all of TV's moves, and I can deconstruct what I'm seeing on the screen pretty readily now. And I think that being in that sort of, I don't want to call it remote, but yes, somewhat remote part of the country made it so I had to focus on that stuff because there wasn't so much of a community of culture around me.
So for you, because with many people that have such a passion for a particular subject, do you feel like you can, since you, as you're saying, all of TV's moves,
right?
Can you just still now today and just enjoy a show for what it is, or do you still feel like you can never turn off that part that's always kind of picking it apart and understanding, like, oh, I know how this is working, I know why they're doing that?
I can't turn off that part, but I wouldn't want to. I think that what I do in my writing and on the show, as it pertains to TV, but really as it pertains to all media, is like I just have a ton of fun enjoying pop culture, and I want people to live inside my head and kind of see how it works so that they can do something similar for themselves. I want them to feel how I experience an episode of Fargo. Let's say you watch Fargo on FX.
I wish
you know about it,
yes.
though, right? I want people to get a taste of how I'm seeing those images come across the screen so that the image will come alive for them. And that's been the most satisfying part of being a TV critic over the years, is that I can make the shows really come alive for people just by showing them the details and showing them how bits of the story are connected to a piece of camera work or a certain visual motif or whatever the case may be, and hopefully bring it alive for people.
So for you growing up and just being a major kind of consumer of all this media, when it gets close to high school or college, are you thinking about, like, this is something, how can I have a career where I can just do this?
Yeah. Well, I used to, when I was a kid in grade school, I used to sign my name, John Teti, future game show host. So I always wanted to be on camera, and yet I went to a school where the program was not so much about production, but it was about criticism and analysis, and I really got deeply into that without ever losing my passion for being, performing and being on camera as well. And it just sort of has coalesced in like this dream job that I have now, hosting the AV Club. Like, you could not have scripted it any better for me to end up doing this gig.
So do you go directly from New Hampshire to New York, or is there a stop?
That's right. I went to New Hampshire. Well, I lived in Japan for a year, so there was a bit of a stop. I didn't mention that when we were chatting before the show.
That's fantastic. I've had a chance to, I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago, went to Japan only for about 2 weeks. But it's a place that I always wanted to go, and it exceeded every single one of my expectations.
2 weeks is a great length of time to go there, because you need like a week to get over the jet lag. Yes, I've been to Japan a number of times. I wrote about video games for a long time, another passion of mine. I mean, obviously, I just love pop culture. But so I was going over there for work a lot. But before that, when I was in college, I went over there once, and then my then girlfriend, now wife, got a scholarship for a year over there, and so I joined her for much of that. Lived there, studied the language some more, and I mean, Japan knows pop culture too, so that was just fun to experience a different culture, but just as explosive and postmodern as our own pop culture, and I'm so glad I had that experience. But yes, so I was in Japan for a year, and then I came to New York, and I was a producer, associate producer at The Daily Show for a couple of years, and then I did improv and stand up for a number of years, and ended up winding my way to the AV Club, where I became the games editor.
So so just to backtrack, when you're doing domestic, you're here growing up in New Hampshire, enjoying the state shows from the States, maybe from the BBC or something like that if you get lucky. But then you're living for a year in Japan, and you get just to consume all the media that they have there. What's it like? Because I mean, we've all seen snippets of the kind of way far out game shows and stuff that they will do there.
Yes.
But what's it like just kind of being there for a long stretch of time and just really getting into that sort of what they do?
I gained an appreciation for, you mentioned the game shows, and those are sort of those are a thing people know about Japanese TV for a reason, because the producers in Japan have such a talent for coming up with playful and fun conceits that can play out on screen. And I'm glad that I watched TV while I was over there, because I did gain an appreciation just for like how a small idea can lead to 5 minutes of fun. We ran a clip on the show a couple of weeks ago for an unrelated joke, but it was a clip of this Japanese panel show where they have this recurring bit, candy or not, and they bring out, in this particular clip, it was a man's shoe, and one of the panelists had to bite into it to see if it was just a shoe or an elaborate candy simulation of a shoe. And it's like, it looked like a shoe, but it was in fact made of chocolate or something like that. But just the producer there found the humor and this almost dramatic tension of the panelist opening their mouth and getting ready to take a bite of this shoe or a table or whatever the hell it would be. And I just really admire like being able to identify those almost micro conceits that can get you some bit of entertainment on television.
It seems like from my small time there that I was there, does it seem like many of the shows seem to be kind of panel oriented, where
Yes.
you're getting a lot of commentary and reactions from some activity that is happening?
Panel shows are so big over there, and you mentioned reactions, right? There's this practice that's very common on Japanese TV of the picture-in-picture, right? So they'll be running some wacky clip, and you'll get the little rectangle in the corner, and they cut between panelists, laughing or whatever the case may be, to build in this sort of a feedback loop almost on the screen. Another big thing on Japanese TV, we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole here. I hope you don't mind.
Oh, no, absolutely. I love it.
They subtitle so much, and they not for foreign languages, although of course they do that too, but they subtitle just people speaking, especially on these panel shows, to sort of juice the impact of the funniest lines just by splashing them onto the screen. They're just kind of shameless in how they milk these moments, but I love it.
Now, as as much as I enjoyed just watching them, there was also that sense of frustration for me because
Sure.
I could not neither read nor speak the language, other than just like the few words that people will teach you. That, like
Right.
yeah, they're not really probably sharing on TV at all.
Right.
But for you during your time there, were you able to pick up enough of the language that you could read or watch a show and kind of pick up even without what they were doing?
I could follow along. I could pick up keywords, and I could follow along pretty well. I was never fluent. Proficient was, whatever the difference between those two is. That's where I was. But yes, I could pick up enough. One of my favorite things to watch was the Japanese version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, hosted by this Japanese TV personality, Mino Monta. I don't know if I'm sure he must. If he's still alive, he must still be on Japanese TV because he was born to do it. But he was this Regis-esque character, and it was very enjoyable for me to watch him draw out the big moments and to interact with the contestants and feel how his dynamic was kind of similar to a Regis. I mean, Regis is an old school guy, right? And so was Mino Monta. So I knew enough of the language that I could appreciate personalities like that, and I could appreciate what they were doing. Yeah.
So, because I think one of the shows that I had got a chance to see was where it was a game show where it was a team of two, and if somebody got a question wrong, they'd have to pull some kind of like a sword or like lever out of like almost what looked like a giant pincushion. Yeah. And there was a gentleman on top of their partner who was on a like a bungee cord, super high that was attached to a crane. And then if it got wrong, you possibly would just snap up. And then of course they got the camera there to get the person's face as they're being launched super high into the air. But it was delightful.
Yes, guy on the bungee cord seems to be a common element. I've seen that before. I've seen a show where there are 4 comedians seated on the top of a wall made of cardboard boxes, and they have to pick from a board to have some gag come out, whether it's like a girls' volleyball team or like a monk, and they'll all come out and they'll do something different to sort of assault the wall, throw balls, or slash a sword or whatever, and you're trying to be the last one who falls off. And yes, they're all attached on bungee cords. They make good use of bungee on Japanese TV.
When you watch stuff like that, do you often wonder, like, why, like shows like that, why don't we see more of that kind of stuff here in the States? Is it just because it's just a completely different culture? We as Americans would not gravitate towards watching a lot of that stuff. It'd be a very niche kind of market for that.
I think it's a little too... That's a great question. I think it's a little too loud in general, and that may say, I think Americans tend to think of ourselves maybe as a little lowbrow. I don't really want to assign that to the Japanese TV, but I think it's so loud and such a sensory assault that it just wouldn't register. No, it wouldn't resonate quite as much with American audiences. But boy, that is me being just shooting from the hip there on my cultural analysis. I think it's a good question. And they've tried a number of times to bring Japanese formats over. Like a few years ago, there was that Hole in the Wall game show on Fox, which was just a straight Japanese import. The wackiness does not seem to have the same audience here.
I feel like the one show that seems to definitely have legs is, well, Sasuke or Ninja Warrior.
Sure,
Then
yes.
that kind of made the transition.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is just an enjoyable show. But even watching it, like when G4 used to run all those
the Japanese
God, I
ones.
loved it. And just hearing the Japanese commentators, I just loved it. Even though I couldn't understand it, I loved it.
They've got a great energy.
Yes.
You don't even need to understand it, right? Yeah.
Oh, so good. So you also, as you mentioned, you worked for The Daily Show.
I did.
And it's speaking of, I happened to do like Dan Bacadal after you kind of worked on there for a little bit. Were you there around his time?
Yes. In fact, Dan Bacadal was one of my favorite people at the show. And he got kind of I wonder how much he would want me to talk about this, but he got kind of a bum situation at the show where he didn't quite... let's see, how do I put this? There were correspondents who John favored, and there were correspondents who he didn't necessarily. Mm-hmm. And not because they were less talented than the others, but just because they clicked with him. And Dan just got into a spot where he was kind of getting the hokiest field segments to star in, and he just couldn't really make his mark. But he's one of the funniest people I've ever met. He was kind to me. He got me into improv comedy, which has paid such dividends in my career and just in my life. I'm so glad that I've done that. I wish more people knew who Dan Bacadal was. What's he doing right now?
He's on that show on CBS on that with Colin Hanks and James Brolin.
Right.
Yes, the half-hour sitcom.
Two pop culture experts sitting here.
Yes.
We should know what the name of this show is. Anthony, can you help us out?
Yeah, there you go. Oh, what's it? Life in Pieces? Is that it?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, he keeps getting work.
Yeah.
So that's good.
And he was on, which I did enjoy, that the FX show with...
right.
Yes. Legit.
Thank you.
There you
go.
Whew. This is tough.
Okay, it turned into a quiz show there for a second. We were both hosting our own quiz show there for a second.
But yeah, as you mentioned, improv, because he actually coached me for a little while too.
Oh, did he?
Yes, and I've always loved him, and he shared a little bit of his frustrations over there.
He did. Okay, yeah.
So, which is always like.
So I'm not really telling tales out of school then, except to the millions of listeners. Yeah.
So when you have a chance there, and he kind of introduces you into the world of improv. Was that something where, since you're in New York, are you kind of visiting UCB? Are you checking out some of the other theaters?
I was traveling in those same circles. My theater was the Pit, the People's Improv Theater.
Gotcha.
So there's if you don't know, and why would you, the New York improv scene, there's UCB, which I think many people have heard of. It has something of a national brand. And then there's the Pit. They have two theaters now, I think, People's Improv Theater, and then there's the Magnet, which ended up being my favorite theater and was the smallest. I loved the house teams they had at the Magnet in particular. But it was so much fun. It's such a... Look, everybody who was involved in New York Improv then, and I'm sure now, would claw each other's eyes out for a chance to get an SNL audition or whatever, right? So there was some careerism and competition there, but... It really was a welcoming scene. I have just dear friends from those years doing improv, and because it has to be, right? Like you can't really improv alone. You need to play off partners or really the rest of your team if you have a team. So it's necessarily a group comedy effort, and that comes through in the culture, which is a pretty welcoming and fun culture in my experience.
And I would think for somebody that finds such joy in pop culture and all its many facets, where improv is just about celebrating the joys and exploiting that and showing it.
Good point.
And so
yes.
Does that really? I could see that really kind of feeds into the way you look at and approach pop culture.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I like to Now, maybe you folks have heard this lingo before, but I like to apply yes and wherever I can in my life. And yes and, if you don't know, it's just an improv philosophy that you don't say no to something that comes up in a scene. Instead, you sort of internalize it and then build on it. And that's how you create a good scene. If you have a scene where people are denying each other's reality, you can't build anything with that. So if somebody says, I'm a giraffe, you don't say, oh, no, you're an elephant. You say, oh, okay, and I'm an elephant, or whatever, right? And I apply that to so much in my life. I'm surprised how much it's influenced me. And like when I approach, say I'm running a review of a TV show, I see a lot of critics who will react to, say, an episode of Girls, let's say, and say, oh, I wish Hannah had done this, and I think it might have been better if they configured this storyline this way. And my thing as a critic is always like, well, they didn't. Like, you have the show that you have. They made the show that they made, so react to that reality. Treat that as if it's real, and see what that tells you about the characters. You wished that Hannah would have acted this certain way, and instead she acted this way. Instead of denying that reality, why not see what you can learn about the person if you just think about the psychology? Why did they make that choice? Why did she choose to have the baby? That was a thing the last season of Girls. I don't know how I got on Girls. It's just an example. But so in my criticism, it's not that I never say anything is bad, or that I never critique anything negatively. But I do try to make it come alive for people, like I was saying earlier. And I think that the way to do that is to yes and what's in front of you and say, like, okay, here's how this works, and here's the connections we can make, and here's what we can learn from this about the characters and about ourselves and maybe about the human experience. I just find that so much more productive than saying, this is bad, this is good, which anybody can do, especially with the internet. With the democratization of media, right? Anybody can say yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down. I think you have to push yourself a little more as a critic, and I think that yes-anding is a great way to do that.
So while you're on the Daily Show working on these pieces, because the field pieces are just so fascinating.
And that's what I worked in the field department, yeah.
So because I feel like there's certainly... I'm always curious about the process for something like that.
Yeah.
Where how long? A lot of research going into finding the story that you want to tell.
Right.
And then are you as a team kind of coming up with like, this is how we want to approach it, and hopefully we're getting the bites from these people that we're going to be meeting in the field that are going to kind of go along this trend?
So what you're describing is a fishing expedition, which is like a last resort. That's not how you want it to go. Now, they may do it differently. It's been a little more than 10 years since I was there, but I'm pretty sure they still approach it the same way. I would comb through the news and just try to come up, I would either find an interesting story, or I would come up with a sort of counterintuitive angle for a popular story. One of my first segments was, I don't know if you remember, Mike Brown and Katrina. He was the head of FEMA at the time. Heck of a job, Brownie. This seems like a different era now. Not so long ago. One of Mike Brown, he was the head of FEMA at the time, and one of his resume items was that he ran horse shows. And he was being just mocked relentlessly for this in the popular press. So I said, why don't we go to a horse show and treat it like, defend Mike Brown and show how a horse show is very similar to like a natural disaster. So that was so I'd come up with ideas like that. That one in particular happened to get approved by John. He would approve the ones that he liked, and then the rubber would really hit the road, because then I would start calling up the people. I would start lining up the characters who were going to give us our comedy beats in the scene. You had to find 3 characters generally, and you had to line them up in advance. My powers of persuasion were put to the test and were developed by this job, because people know what The Daily Show is, and we did not lie and we did not try to conceal what The Daily Show is. We were upfront with people. Now, we had certain lines that in the way we would describe the show to make it sound more appealing, but we convinced people to be on the show. And then once you have all of them lined up, you have the locations lined up, then you send the field producer out, and hopefully by then the fate of the piece just lies in the reactions you're getting on camera. You're not worried about whether someone's going to do it or not, or be scared off or not.
Was it harder as the longer the Daily Show ran for you to convince people, like, I know we take a satirical look at these stories, but really you should come on our show and tell your certainly heartfelt story and feel like we're going to represent it well? It
was not harder, and I'll tell you why. A, people want to be on TV. We always had that going for us. B, we would frame it, and this is what I was talking about when I said we had certain lines. We would frame it, and this is not dishonest. We'd say, look, the correspondent is the one who's going to be the buffoon here, which is true. Like, if you watch Daily Show segments, yes, they're making fun of other people, but it's really the correspondent most of the time who's acting dumb. Not in every case, not in every interview, but most of the time the correspondent is the buffoon. Now, that doesn't mean that at the same time we're not making fun of the person on the other end, but they have that reassurance that they're not the only fool in the room. My success rate was pretty high in terms of booking people, mostly because I think of the first reason people want to be on TV. I did have this moment once. We were doing a segment about going off the grid, and we had found this. As you can imagine, it's hard to track down experts in this field, right?
True.
So we'd found this guy who'd written a book about going off the grid, and I had tracked him down and gotten him on the phone and booked him. And we were now, because I had booked him and a couple of other characters, we were now about halfway through the production of this segment. And on the day he was going to be flying in to do his on-camera interview, he called me and said, I'm driving away from the airport now. I was talking to my buddy, and he said, unless you've got your finger on the edit button, you don't know what they're going to do with your image, right? Which is 100% true. Yeah. Was great advice from his friend, but I didn't care for it too much. I also was charmed by the notion that editing, like, there's just one button for editing, right? So I just, like, at this point, again, the segment's already in production, so it's lost time and effort if it falls apart now. And we were not going to find another off-the-grid guy. So just, like, this demon swelled up inside me. I became, like... And look, TV producers have to be jerks sometimes. Like, sometimes you just have to push people around to get what you want on screen. And I said to this guy, I didn't know where it came from. I said, listen to me. The day this segment airs, you can go on Amazon.com and watch your book climb up the sales charts for the publicity we're going to give you. And I gave him a couple other lines that I just was pulling out of nowhere. And I got him to turn his car around and go back to the airport. And it was just like this exhilarating success to save the piece. Most instances were not that stressful, but there were moments where you're just holding it together with your bare teeth, it feels like. With your bare teeth? With
your bare teeth.
Are teeth ever not bare? What the hell does that mean?
Putting your special, like, teeth shirts on, your teeth hats.
I undressed my teeth and really laid it on the line for this guy. Your bare teeth.
So while you're doing this, are you also having time to write as well? Because you're so focused on the show. Is that so time-consuming that the writing, whether about pop culture, video games, are you still able to do that?
Writing was not part of my career at that point.
Okay.
It was only after I left the show and was just, getting stand-up gigs, doing improv, which doesn't pay anything, that I really needed freelance writing as a source of income, and got deeply into that.
So for improv, did improv and stand-up kind of come at the same way?
Yeah,
or was it the idea of, like, well, improv, it's fun, but as you're saying, very rarely do you get paid?
Well, it's not like I made a ton of money at stand-up either, but I made some money. I enjoyed them both, and they both have their merits, and improv at that point felt new, which it wasn't. Improv's been around for 40-odd years now as a practice. Del Close, of course, in Chicago sort of started building the curriculum of improv. But I just was interested in them both. I love being up on stage and working an audience, and I don't love bombing, of course, but I'm so glad I've had that experience of just being up on stage and dealing with the fact that maybe an audience just isn't into you that night, or maybe your material isn't that good and you need to work on it. I think any performer can benefit from that experience. Because once you've been through that, just a lot of other stuff rolls off your back. It's the truth.
So now you move to Chicago and you start writing with the AV Club. Do you also get involved in stand-up and improv in Chicago? I mean, it is, as you're saying, the hub, the birthplace of improv.
Yeah, that's a good point. But no, I just moved to Chicago about 3 years ago, and I've been writing for the AV Club for 9 years now. So I was editing their games coverage from New York. And I was never going to leave New York. Have you spent any time in New York, Frank?
Oh, usually like long weekends, 3 or 4 days at a stop. And I love the city. It's phenomenal.
I loved it too, and I never intended to leave. I was like, this is the center of the universe. Everything I want is here. And the AV Club, the editor there had asked me a few times to come out to Chicago. He said, there's a job for you out here. And I just said, no, I'm never Chicago. The Midwest, forget it. I was an East Coast boy, right? Dumbass. So one day he finally said to me, basically, look, why don't you just type up the job that would make you come out to Chicago and, work here at AV Club HQ, and I'll tell you if we can give you that job. So I spent a weekend and I typed up this job description, and he was just like, fine, get out here. And at that point, I couldn't really say no.
No, that's true.
I'm so glad I went. I love Chicago. The pace is a little easier. The people are considerably nicer in general. New York people certainly have their merits too. I'm not trying to knock New York, but Chicago people are just nicer, and I just have a better time. And I realized once I got out that it was not so bad to be away from, like I said earlier, people are willing to claw each other and climb over each other to advance, especially in comedy. There's so many people who want to do that, and I didn't realize how tired I had gotten of that. Despite the fact that I made wonderful friends and all that, it is just a constant rat race, and Chicago, there's just a little less of that, and it's been a nice relief.
Well, certainly when it comes down to the food. I mean, that's one reason I do love going to New York is because I feel like you can eat so much and be able to walk around the whole city. So, although I never did find my great pizza place.
Oh,
in
no?
New York. I never really found one that really spoke to me, as much as I love pizza. So coming to Chicago.
So do you think LA pizza is better? Is that what you're saying?
No, my favorite place is because I grew up around Chicago. I grew up
Oh, you did? I didn't know that.
I grew up near Joliet, so that's where I grew up.
Oh, okay.
So it's my favorite pizza place is Aurelio's Pizza. I don't know if they have much in the city anymore, but it's more in the suburbs.
Aurelio's.
Oh, that's
little plug for them right now.
Yeah, there you go, guys. Please.
What kind? Not deep dish though. You're saying just pizza.
I'm more of a thin crust guy.
Okay.
I don't like a lot of dough in my pizza.
I don't mind the dough. It's all the sauce and the deep dish that gets me. And the just layer of cheese. It seems like such an artless approach to pizza.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, Chicago folks, and I know I'm betraying my adopted hometown, but I just do not care for deep dish.
So when the member from the AV Club says, all right, just write up what you want your dream job to be, did you really kind of go over the top, like, I'm going to write something that's going to be like, almost so crazy that he's going to have to really go for it if he wants to accept it, or like I'll just treat it like this is just my simple job that I want and be very easy, or did you really kind of go for it?
No, I did keep it within the realm of possibility. Certainly, I was at a point. I had done video games for a while then, and that was my main video game writing was really my main thing. I'd done some TV writing, and I just said to Josh Modell, who was my dear friend and who was editor of the AV Club at the time. I basically said to him that I want the freedom to pursue the writing, to pursue the topics that interest me, and to be able to build features on the site and to work with other writers on the site in almost sort of a internal freelance way. It wasn't that I was tired of video games, although I was to a degree. It's just that I wanted to explore, and I felt that this is a little bit of bragging, but I was one of the top writers on the site, and I felt that by then I had earned the opportunity to branch out a little more. One of the first things I did when I got there was to start a football column called Block and Tackle. It's about NFL football, which we'd never done any sports on the AV Club before, and I looked at it as pop culture, as a media product, because that's how I look at things, and it took off, and I think it really showed that what's great about the AV Club, to me, is not just the range of things that we cover that qualify as pop culture, but it's the voice and the perspective that we bring to it. And my philosophy for a number of years has been, you can apply that to almost anything in the mass culture, and we can get some interesting results out of it.
So hence your title, Editor-at-Large, because at first I was wondering, like,
that's my title now, yeah.
Yes. So at large means pretty much you can just cover anything that you want.
Now, yeah.
Yes.
I came to Chicago and I was senior editor, but it basically meant editor-at-large. It was the same thing, although I was involved more in running the site too. And then I was editor-in-chief for about a year, and then the Onion was acquired by... that's shorthand, acquired. I don't know all the details of the stock or whatever, but we're basically part of Univision now. And the Fusion Network came to me and said, let's develop a show, a TV show.
Well, certainly, I mean, there is a wealth of material to be able to tap into with the Onion and the AV Club. So I can understand why Univision, when acquiring you guys, said, like, this is just a great wealth of stuff that we can jump into.
Yeah,
so,
I'm glad they did.
Yeah. So did that take you by surprise when they said, you know what, we'd love for you to develop a TV show for us? Were you expecting anything like that?
I've always been expecting. I told you how I signed
that's right. That's true. Yep.
Yeah. No. I felt I had positioned myself for that, so I was ready for it for sure.
One thing before we delve into the TV show for 1 second.
Yeah.
Looking at your Instagram feed, you have some.
Oh my God! I haven't been on Instagram in so long. What did you find?
Yes, but just because I always have a soft spot for the original Match Game with Charles Nelson Riley. You've got that on there, and I am a sucker for that show. Anytime it comes on the Game Show Network, I'm down for that.
We could have made this whole podcast about Match Game. Yes, I love game shows, and Match Game is one of my favorites. And I think that the thing about Match Game is it's such a fascinating time capsule because the sort of underlying fun of the game was that you had these questions, like, if you haven't seen it, there's a panel of celebrities and they're given a question such as, John loves to put butter on his blank. And then they'll all write down their funny little answers and the contestants will try to match them. Well, as you can gather from my example, the show sort of cleverly skirted the edge of the censors because you could, when I say John likes to put butter on his blank, your mind probably thinks at some point, if you're like me, dick, right?
Yep.
But you couldn't say that, and the celebrities wouldn't say that directly in their answers, but everybody thought it, you know? So it was this way of transmitting through the television things that were too naughty to explicitly say, but that everybody would get. So I love to watch it as a time capsule because you can see it almost sketch the edges of what was appropriate in a sort of national media context then, and really get a sense of what was okay in 1976 or whatever the year may be. And I think that's such a great resource to... That makes it sound so dry. It's a hell of a lot of fun to watch, but it's also just fascinating to me to see what we thought was okay at a given point in time, and it can be quite different from what is okay today. I think that the revival hosted by Alec Baldwin on ABC is fantastic, by the way. They did a great job with that.
It's that format and that style, and he's a great host to Bill. I mean, G. Rayburn is, without compare, but still. Right. Alec Baldwin, because it's always nice because you want those guests with the pressure on them, will invariably say just the stupidest answer for what it is. And you're like, oh, really? Good luck matching any of that.
It's a tough game when you're on that panel and you have to come up with a joke or the perfect answer. Yeah.
So now it comes all of a sudden, like, we want you to do a show for us.
Yeah.
Had you, as you're saying, you've always been waiting for this moment, did you already have, like, the idea of if when they come and ask me for my show, I know exactly what I want it to be? And you had that right out of the gate, or was it a little bit of trial and error?
I did not. There was a lot of trial and error. It actually started life as a sports show off my Block and Tackle column, and it was going to be called 110%, and it was going to be kind of a similar format to what the AV Club show is. But we developed that for a little while, and then we just sort of fell back into pop culture, and that just made more sense. There's a number of production reasons for that I won't get into. It's expensive to put on a sports show because of all the footage you need, and because the leagues charge a great deal of money for you to use that. That's one of many reasons that it just didn't click at this particular moment, and I'm fine with that. So then it became this pop culture show, and I did not know exactly what I wanted it to be. Obviously, it's influenced by The Daily Show because I've worked there and I know how that show works, and I also admire shows like Samantha Bee. I just think Sam Bee is killing it right now. So it's modeled a little bit on those shows, but it continues to evolve. Did I know exactly what I wanted it to be? No, I had an idea and I was able to put together a treatment pretty quickly, but I still don't know exactly what I want it to be. And the show will continue to evolve, and hopefully they'll give us a second season at the end of the year. We'll see. But one of the things I learned at The Daily Show was John really insisted on never letting the show become stale and never letting it feel like we were going through the motions. So I'm always questioning, do we need the monologue at this part of the show? Should we put it in Act 3? That's actually a discussion we're having right now. Should we put more emphasis on the games that we play with the celebrities we have on? Like I said, I've always wanted to be a game show host, so I'd love to play these little games I've come up with. How do we best, like I said, make the pop culture come alive for people, entertain people? It's a constant puzzle. So the answer is I don't even know still exactly what I want the show to be, but I am having a hell of a lot of fun doing it.
One of the pieces that I watched was when you bring everybody in to talk about streaming television, and which you want to get their opinions on streaming services. And it's like, and at first I thought it was
the focus group.
Yes, the focus group. And I thought the first was going to be the bit where you just put it on the TV and it's just buffering, and that was just like a play on that. But then when it turns around to be like, we want to be able to focus on the throbber.
Focus on the buffering.
Yeah, that, what a delightful spin. I was not expecting that, and that was delightful.
That was the first thing we shot for the show, actually, even though it came up in like episode 10 or some such. But yeah, we did this focus group. I don't know if people know this. I think most people don't. But that little spinning wheel, sometimes it's like a ribbon, sometimes it's lines, but that little spinning wheel that appears while you're waiting for your show to load has kind of tickled me recently, because I always think, look, we're all in our silos, right? No show has a like 40 share anymore, right? We're all sort of watching our own little shows, and yet these wheels must be one of the most highly, quote-unquote, rated shows in the nation, because everybody at some point watches that spinning wheel, which is called a throbber. That term is not in terribly common usage, probably for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But
it wasn't until I watched that segment that I realized that's what it's called?
I figured. So we had a focus group where we had people critique the throbber and try to make it better, and these people, they were wonderful. They really got into it, and because we presented it to them as an actual like focus group, and I kind of loved their ideas. One guy wanted the throbber to be a little man making his way to his house.
Yes.
And another person wanted the fireworks to explode. Focus groups, I think, are an underutilized tool for TV. You know what show uses them really well is Nathan For You has done a couple of focus groups that have worked out. You like that show too?
That show is phenomenal.
Oh my God, he is a genius.
Yes.
He's a comedian of a generation, I think. He knows how to use the TV apparatus and the sort of intimidating force of the camera to create comedy that, to me, it's just phenomenal. I laugh so hard at that show. Some people can't stand it because it's awkward.
It is, but just like the right turns that it will take in these stories that he's telling. Oh, it's phenomenal. Still the one where he wants to go home and he brings the police officer to the parents' home. It's like for defacing the poster and drawing the penis sign. And it's like, now it's time for the last.
He traps this poor kid into defacing a poster. Yeah.
That is. I cannot wait for that show to come back. That is one of those.
Soon, I think. A little later this year.
Please, sooner the better. For focus groups, though, I often wonder, like, because are you basically just casting for a real focus group?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I feel like you could have ended up with 4 clunkers in that room.
We could have.
Yeah.
We could have. And that's, I have to depend on my improvisational training. I put heavy scare quotes around that, but improvisational experience, let's say, to identify what is special and what is funny about this person, and just it's not even a conscious thing, but I'm just sort of waiting to see the reaction that is a little off kilter, or the piece of information they volunteer that just is like, that's singular to you, and drawing that out. I think we could have gotten a different group in there, and I would have been able to maneuver it so that we got something out of the segment. I think it would have been hard to actually get 4 clunkers, as you put it. But yes, I also have to say, I think we got lucky on this particular focus group. We had that one fella who just started to sympathize with the throbber and play acted. Walter, he was hilarious. So it's also luck of the draw, because we're just going on Craigslist, and I think we had maybe 8 candidates for the focus group, and then our talent producer Ashton narrowed it down to those 4. But again, it's just going on Craigslist and putting a posting up for people who are free in the middle of the day on a Thursday.
Man, it's just like, that's all going back to Nathan for you too, when he will break down these stories, and just like, we put a post on Craigslist, just like, man, because you see so many of those weirdo posts on Craigslist.
Yes.
And to know that one of them could be for the AV Club, another one could be for Nathan for you, that it yields such comedy out of it, but to the common person, many people would be like, okay, this seems weird, I'm just going to shy away from that. He's
exposing a tool and this is something he does very well on his show too, but he's exposing a tool of the TV industry, making it part of his story when he goes on Craigslist like that. We used to use Craigslist for stuff like this all the time at The Daily Show. I'm sure every show does it. I don't know what modern TV production would do without that site. In fact, it's just you sort of type something in and people come out. And people who have a weird ability to make you laugh that you wouldn't expect.
Well, as you say, everybody wants to be on TV. So to have a platform where you can go on there and find opportunities like, oh, wait, I could go and be part of this and maybe just gain some notoriety. Sure, why not?
Yeah, definitely.
I've got something to say. Let me go there.
Yeah, but we didn't let people know this was going to be on TV. They thought it was a straight-up focus group. So... people want to do anything. It's
another one of the game shows, and you've done this for a while, but Pick a Choice.
Pick a Choice, yeah.
That is such a fun, easy game, but it's a lot of fun.
Thank you.
I will say the one thing that as I was watching you playing that, and I was watching the Peter Sagal one.
Yeah.
But just the cards that you write, all the celebrities and the circumstances.
Scenarios,
yes. They're just really nice quality cards. I was like, those are really nice. All right. You feel like just like no cards or something, but I was like, man, those are really good
You're
cards.
admiring the quality of the cards.
Was.
Yes. Well, let me give a plug. I got those at makeplayingcards.com, and they do what it says on the box, and they do make nice cards. I can't argue with them. But yes, Pick a Choice is a game. For the folks who don't know, there's one deck of cards full of famous names, real and fictional people, but, celebrities, people in pop culture. And then there's a deck of scenarios, like dressing you for a job interview or managing your Twitter account or whatever the case may be. And I just have the guest pick 2 names and 1 scenario, and then they have to decide which name they'd rather have in the scenario. I love playing this game, again, because it's kind of an improv thing. Not kind of, it is an improv thing, but we end up having conversations with the guest that I never could have gotten at in a straight interview. We, just a couple hours ago, Frank, we taped Pick a Choice with Leah Thompson. You remember her?
Yes. From Back to the Future.
From Back to the Future, from
Yes.
Caroline in the City.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, good memory. And we got into this conversation because one of the cards that came up was managing your finances or something like that. And she had to choose between, who was it? I can't remember the names. But in any case, we got into a conversation about this crooked financial manager she had in the past, who apparently went to jail for 7 years. I guess it's prison at that point. Went to prison for 7 years. And I just, as it was happening, I thought, like, there's no way this would have come up in a straight interview, and yet it's this funny backstory about her life. I just love to play pick a choice. I've considered making all the interviews pick a choice, but we couldn't really get away with that. But I love playing that game, and we did it on the web for a long time too.
And what I like about it is just the simple thing where it's like basically 3 rounds, where after you do the first 2, then the winners of those 2 compete again. And I feel like it's just a nice, simple way to just kind of close the whole loop on the game. And I was like, that's just really nice, as opposed to just like, we're just going to do series and series and series and series.
Yeah.
But
there's a little bit of an arc to it, definitely.
So what, for you, coming up with Pick a Choice, what is the art of picking just like a simple, playable, easy to grasp and understand game?
Pick a Choice took a little while to develop, actually, because it wasn't working in playtesting, because I was trying to make the scenarios too funny on their own. So it was like trapped in an elevator with a polar bear or something like that, and I realized I'm forcing it. The scenarios, most of them are pretty bland, actually. Maybe it's parasailing with you, or maybe there's some funny little detail in there, but if the scenarios are too overbearing, it doesn't leave any room for the player to take it in an unexpected direction. So the trick with Pick a Choice was to step back and use more general scenarios and, really hew to more recognizable famous names so that the player could then bring something unexpected. I thought it was a game of writing where I sort of imposed the humor on the guest, and then I realized, no, this is a game of surprise where we see what emerges. I learned that it was an improv game. But you have to test things, and you have to find those sort of contours to it in order to come up with a workable game. It's very easy to come up with a game that is just death on camera.
Because I also think of like podcasts like Doug Benson, Doug Love's Movies, where he just has those simple hooks of games too. And this felt very similar to me there, where it's just easily explainable, and you can play it with anybody, and they can be able to easily grasp it and play it. And it leaves room for, as you said, just those incredible left turns that you would never expect.
It has to be simple. You, as a fellow game show fan, you'll know the name Mark Goodson, who was, of course,
Mark Goodson production.
That's right. That's right. A Mark Goodson television production, or Mark Goodson, Bill Todman before that, his business partner. And Mark Goodson, I believe in the 20th century, had, I think the number is 27 game show formats. Sometimes they would repeat, they would come back. But he sold 27 game show formats all told. That number is maybe not spot on, but it's pretty close. Whereas his competitors would maybe sell like 1, 2, 4 maybe over the course of their careers. He had a talent for developing games that could be explained in a sentence or 2, and you could play along at home, simple enough for anyone to grasp instantly, and yet could produce entertainment for hours and hours and hours. That is really hard. It's hard to capture all those elements in one game. And whenever I see a new game show that entertains me, I just think, how did they come up with that? Because it seems like all the ideas have been taken, but people once in a while will come up with something new.
So when you see something like The Wall, I'm thinking that the most latest game show that's come out, where it's basically just an oversized Plinko. But so for something like that, do you embrace thinking, like, wow, that's a nice spin on a concept that we've already seen before, kind of taken large?
In theory, although I'm not crazy about The Wall in particular, I do remember getting that feeling with Deal or No Deal, which is a pretty dumb game. It's simple and maybe not the most, I'm using that in maybe not the most flattering sense, but I was taken aback by how much fun Deal or No Deal was to watch for a while. And it's very different in the UK. So here we had like the Stairway of Babes with the suitcase, right? And the shadowy window where you could see the silhouette of the banker. Like, they really played up the drama. It's very different in the UK. It's sort of more communal, and it's interesting to see different approaches to the same idea. But I was really, to answer your question, I was just struck by how Deal or No Deal took a game of, like, I don't know, high school math, basically, and turned it into an entertaining phenomenon.
I feel like maybe some of my issues, like say with The Wall, and to a little lesser extent like Deal or No Deal, is when you think of like maybe The Price is Right, or you think like Card Sharks or Tic Tac Doe or something like that, where the prizes are lower, so the stakes in the sense of like. Of thinking like The Wall or Deal or No Deal, where like this could potentially change your life if you won, $1 million.
Right.
Where they really milk the emotion. And sometimes I feel like, I just want to get to the fun of the game.
I couldn't agree more. And you even see, we were talking about Match Game, right? Like on the 70s Match Game, you'd have these oddball contestants, and they'd be returning champions, and the contestants could be characters but they were sort of natural characters. They were human beings. On a prime time game show, especially a weekly one, the airtime is so precious that the contestant producers take a different tack, and they really get people who are televisual, and they are made for TV, and they don't feel authentic anymore, and they're not going to surprise you because they have their shtick, and they come out and they have their story for Alec Baldwin, and that's pretty much it. They dance around, they have a lot of energy, because that's what the producers want, but you don't get the sort of slice of humanity that you'll get on a daytime show, because a daytime show can afford to have a few clunkers, as you put it earlier, whereas on primetime, that's just not acceptable.
I feel like I miss the days of daytime television game shows. I feel like, when you could see like Deal of the Century, you could see Card Sharks, Tic Tac Doe, Scrabble, even if you want to.
Scrabble, it was a great show. People don't talk about that. Scrabble, hosted by Chuck Woolery in the 80s, is one of the best game shows I've ever seen. I don't know why it doesn't get rerun. Maybe there's some rights issue with it, but I'm glad. Wow, you know your stuff to bring up Scrabble.
And then of course you got the Press Your Luck. Which, that's. But
elaborate on that. Why did you make that face at Press Your Luck?
Oh well, no, Press Your Luck was fun. Anytime they brought it back, it's never felt as good as the original version.
Agreed. Yeah.
And so and then the story of the man who just kind of was able to
Michael Larson, who beat the system.
Yeah, which like that just still impresses the heck out of me. Yeah, I'm like, all right, to be able
dedication.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if I could do that, but I miss seeing those daytime game shows. It's now become so much more about talk shows and stuff, which is all right, but there's some that sense of kind of fun and just. Let's just watch people play a game for a little bit and see what happens.
Now, the networks really got away from that in the 90s. Part of it was daytime hours being given back to the affiliates, and they, for whatever reason, gravitated toward these more sensational talk shows like Maury Povich, Ricky Lake. Oprah was a very different show back then, and talk shows really did take over, and they really never completely let go. You see a lot of judge shows now too. Those are sort of the type of syndicated strips that are being sent out there. And game shows never quite regained their foothold in daytime. Although CBS does have that Price is Right, Let's Make a Deal block, and you've got syndicated Millionaire and Family Feud, but those are usually on in the late afternoon or evening. So I agree. I miss the days of daytime game shows when you'd stay home from school and you could watch 4 or 5 hours straight.
That was great.
Game shows.
Because you have another picture on your Instagram too. Was it from Tattletales?
Yeah, Tattletales.
Where it was just like the one guest I can always remember is like Shirley Jones and her husband at the time.
Yeah, who cares what his name is?
Marty Frank, was that his name or something like that? But just the picture with just such a great stage picture.
Tattletales was this sort of newlywed game type show, but played with celebrity couples. And they had just as an appreciator of composition on the TV frame, they had this setup where the one spouse would be, like the wives would be seated at the panel, and in front of each wife there would be a little TV with the husband in it. He's backstage, and when the TV's off, he can't hear what's going on out front. Just a weird, so you'd have, the big head and the little head on the screen, and then halfway through the show they'd switch. But who would think to do that, to put a little TV on TV and have that be a character on the screen? I find game shows to be, especially these classic game shows we're talking about, to be a font of compositional creativity in that respect.
So now getting back to the AV Club, you're on Thursday nights.
Yes.
And so one night a week. Is that enough for you? Is like just a sheer production of trying to get one show on a week is enough?
Oh my God!
You could
yes.
imagine doing it like the Daily Show, doing it 4 times a week.
We'd need a much bigger staff. The Daily Show was about 120 people, and we are about 15 permanent. Or we have about a dozen permanent staff, and then of course we have like day crew who come in for shooting days. It would just have to be a much bigger operation. It is exhausting to get this weekly show out right now. And I'm happy with the weekly show for sure. It's just a whole other. It's an order of magnitude bigger when you go to daily for sure.
So what is kind of a typical work week for you guys when you're doing the show?
We shoot on Tuesdays for the show that airs Thursday. So my week, it's hard to figure out where it starts, but I'm writing headlines on Sunday night. I'm seeing what's come in from the writers. Sunday night we'll write. Usually we'll try to get another joke or two in on Monday if anything happens, because we're trying to have timely weekly headlines, but we're taping 2 days in advance, and you have to also get the jokes written in advance. So that part is tricky. I think we've managed pretty well so far. So I'm starting to work Sunday afternoon. Then Monday, it's just buttoning up everything for the Tuesday shoot. Tuesday's a shoot day. We'll tape the desk piece for that week and an interview, maybe for that week, maybe for the next week. It's always sort of a jigsaw puzzle. And then on Wednesday, I am immediately turning the page to what's next. And Wednesday is sort of an ideation day, and Thursday is a very heavy writing day where I write the monologue. It's called The Turn on the show because I turn my chair to deliver it. And sometimes I'll be going from a draft that one of the writers has done. Sometimes, like with a topic like Fargo that I know really well myself and don't need to do a ton of research. Well, I do have to do research, but that I don't need like a grounding in. I'll just write that from scratch myself on Thursday, and it takes most of the day because I want to. I don't know. Have you done some writing, Frank? Are you a writer yourself? So
you're nowhere near as talented as everybody there.
Well, you're very sweet, but you know that the first draft is not what you want. So I have to go through that drafting process and find an idea that I think it hasn't been said 1,000 times already, and that really, again, makes something come alive for people, whether it's Fargo or whether it's Twitter or whether it's the issue of women's representation in Hollywood. I want to say something unique or as close to it as I can get, and that takes time. So really, Thursday is just a full writing day, and then Friday is odds and ends, basically. We're kind of exhausted by then. But that's a typical week for me.
Was it for the writers on the show? Was it a challenge for them to be able, and for you to be able to have them write in your voice? Something that you feel like this would be the way that I would deliver this. They
have gotten better at that. That's a skill for any TV writer to acquire, to be able to write for the host. And my writers have done a great job of that, and they hadn't done anything like that before. Fran and Yolanda are the two staff writers, Fran Hoffner and Yolanda Carney. They're on the show a lot because they're just smart, fun people. And I knew that they would be able to acquire that skill. So when I was looking for writers, I wanted people who knew about stuff and could bring a perspective that I didn't have. Because, look, I know about a lot of pop culture, but I also have big gaps. I don't know, for instance, like pop music terribly well. I have a sort of surface knowledge of it, but Fran knows a ton of it. So she can educate me, and we can have conversations that illuminate it for me so that I feel ready to go out on the show and talk to people about it, right? That, to me, that's such a crucial asset that I think a lot of TV personalities might overlook. I think the easy thing is to try to find people who are like you and who, you could picture hanging out with. Not that I wouldn't hang out with my writers, but that's a trap. I think you really want to find people who are different from you, who have a different point of view, who can have a conversation with you, sure, but that are going to sort of broaden the realm of pop culture in which you can participate. And these guys they covered my gaps so nicely that I really feel like we can take on anything together.
So I always think, like with actors, anytime they take on a role, it's a chance to kind of explore a different life, about a different profession, different way of life. But as a host, Do you enjoy that, getting, as you're saying, with pop music, getting that immersion, getting that deep dive on a subject you really don't know about, but do you enjoy learning about that? It gives you an opportunity to learn about a lot of subjects that you say you may have a little blank
exactly.
spot.
I love it, and it's something that I take as a responsibility, because I need to be presenting to the audience. Like I have to be knowledgeable, and I have to, like I said, be presenting a unique viewpoint. So it's a challenge, and the cram sessions are exhausting, and just sort of getting a picture in my mind is exhausting. But yes, I love pop culture, as I think anybody watching or listening to this understands by now. So being forced to learn, that's not a problem for me. It's just a great part of the job.
And I mentioned, as you mentioned, kind of your point of view to learn about a subject like pop music, but you don't want to just have her perspective. You want to be able to kind of learn that information, have time to kind of think about it, and see what you find interesting about it.
Correct. Yes, exactly. And I think so. Look, when you see the monologues, frankly, sometimes it's 100% me, and sometimes it's what I've synthesized from Fran and Yolanda and even other staff members, and it's the stuff that grabbed me, that resonated with me, the ideas that sort of planted themselves in my brain and then blossomed a little bit. So it's a team. Look, it's a team effort every week, really. Even in the Fargo episode, where, like I said, I drafted that monologue myself and I had a point of view coming into it. What's an even better example is the young adult episode, where I wrote a monologue about 13 Reasons Why, this Netflix show, and then I showed it to Yolanda, and we talked about it, and she basically said, not in so many words, half of this is garbage. Like, half of this is stuff that I've already seen on Twitter, and you're not saying anything new here. And I realized immediately she was right, and went home that night and just overhauled the whole thing. And I just was like, I was vibrating with excitement to deliver that monologue, because I felt like Yolanda had made it so much better by pointing out to me the stupidity of what I had written. So it's a fun process.
Does it, because you mentioned earlier, like the democratization of the internet with opinions and stuff. When you approach something with Yolanda or Fran, and it is something that we've been on Twitter, and these are viewpoints that we've had or we've read about. Is that harder? Is it become harder now to feel like the internet is so out there that everybody has a chance to kind of share a thought?
Yeah.
To be able to feel like I have a truly unique take or a unique spin or a unique approach to some show or some concept.
It's not hard. Do I think it's harder than it used to be? Yeah, probably. Do I think it's hard for me? It's a challenge, but I've always insisted on that with myself. The football column is a great example. Look, there's 1,000 sites about football out there already. What am I going to add that's unique? Except when I went into it, I said, every time I write this column, it needs to be something that you're not going to be able to get anywhere else. I really encourage creators to put that challenge in front of yourself, because then you discover what's unique about you and what you in particular have to offer. And it just made for, obviously in my heavily biased opinion, a better column. And so, one time I was flying up to New Hampshire from New York, going home to New Hampshire from New York, and the flight used to be on this just like 12-seater prop plane, turboprop, and when it was windy, the landings would be a harrowing experience as a passenger. You were just getting tossed around. And one time on the windiest landing I ever experienced, and when I was one of 2 passengers on the plane, and I just thought, well, this is going to be like the page 4 of the of the paper tomorrow. Down at the bottom, people killed in small airplane accident. We landed just fine, and as I was staring out, I asked the pilot, is it really difficult to land in heavy crosswinds like that? And he thought about it for a moment, and he said, it's challenging, but it's not difficult. And it took me a little while to really parse what that meant. But I think what he was saying, and at least as I've applied it to my own career, is the challenge of saying something unique certainly is a challenge. But do I find it difficult? No, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to do it. I've done it so many times by now that I know that I'm going to do it, because I'm not going to be satisfied until I feel that I have. So it's just part of the job that I really thrive on at this point.
And coming from your improv background as well, I mean, that's one great thing about being an improviser is finding out, because as many people will find as they do that, what makes, I'm just like anybody else, what do I have to say? But improv really kind of forces you to kind of like, only you have your own unique point of view.
That's right.
Nobody else has that.
That's right. But you have to develop that. You know, it's not enough if you want to do something like what I'm doing or be a commentator in any field. It's not enough to be on Twitter firing off your little lines and your quote-unquote hot takes. And I use that term with advisement because I hate it, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
That it maybe gives you this feeling that you're saying something, but it's so transient and so insubstantial. It just flies down the feed so quickly. I would really encourage aspiring writers to, yes, step back and not be satisfied with your sort of snap take and find what's special about you and expand on that and develop it instead of just getting in a retweet contest.
Now, one thing about your show that I also enjoy is I love shows that will have just like the crew be the de facto studio audience, where you're thinking about like Talk Soup or something like that, where you just, when a joke, you know, it could be something, an inside joke amongst the host and the crew, but just you see that little, just small little bit of laughter in there where it doesn't seem so forced with a studio audience.
Right.
I love that more than anything. So for you coming up with the show, is that like, I want to be able to have the crew, if they're going to laugh, you guys can laugh.
Yeah. Well, we do have a small studio audience most weeks, but a lot of it is the crew laughing. The crew often has heard the headlines and the monologue once or even twice before we do the taping for air. So if I can get a laugh out of them the third time, I always am pretty proud of that. And we're also a show that uses our staff on air, on camera a lot, and that's just stealing from Letterman, basically. He's the one who made that. I think, well, I say that, but we did a show where we talked about the Gong Show a couple months ago, and I was watching some old Gong shows, and I realized like Chuck Barris would do that a lot. He'd bring out the crew. Gene the Dancing Machine was a recurring character on the show, and he was just like a stagehand that Gene found who happened to dance in a very entertaining manner. So I forget where I was going with this, but basically, like, I think that I want to do a show where it feels like a team effort. I believe in the team concept, and so I like having the staff be part of it, not just off the air, but also on the air. And yes, I definitely draw energy from it when I get a laugh out of the camera guy. Who wouldn't?
Yeah. You bring up the Gong Show. It's a great classic show to watch. Now, coming back with Mike Myers as the host, but under the guise of, I can't remember his name for the host with that.
I can't either, but I know it's this British, it's as if it's a British TV host who's sort of semi-retired and has come over here to America. That hook does not excite me as much. It's like, I feel like the host should be part of the gag. It's like, no, these acts that you're bringing in, they're comedy enough just to let them kind of do their thing. I don't know if I need the host be part of that. It's peculiar, right? And did you see him on Jimmy Kimmel with Will Arnett hosting when he sort of unveiled the character?
Oh, no.
He did a spot in the week that Jimmy Kimmel was away after his son was born. Will Arnett was guest hosting, and Will Arnett also executive produces the Gong Show. So yes, Mike Myers came on in the guise of this British host character, and I thought it was a pretty funny segment. Do I think it's going to capture the spirit of the original Gong Show? No, I don't think so. But I don't know if you can recreate that now. That was late 70s network and then syndicated TV, but it was daytime TV, and it had this disposable feel about it, kind of like what we were talking about earlier with like Match Game contestant casting. There's no way you can replicate that in a weekly primetime show. The acts are going to be more heavily screened. I mean, Chuck Barris was just throwing people on the stage because he had so much time to fill every week. On a weekly show, you're going to get more heavily screened acts. You're not going to have the sort of shagginess that the Gong Show had, the just sort of burning airtime feel that it would have sometimes. So I think it's smart for Will Arnett and his creative team to just come up with a different take on it. Am I skeptical of it like you are? Sure I am, even though I found the character funny on Jimmy Kimmel, but I think that they're wise to try something else.
It definitely will have less Jamie Farr, which said...
Jamie Farr, J.P. Morgan. Oh, that's right. The reason I brought up David Letterman vis-a-vis The Gong Show was because he was a guest judge a number of times on The Gong Show, and I felt, rewatching these old clips, that he noticed how Chuck Barris would use the crew on camera and maybe incorporated that into his ethos, as he did so much on his late night and then late show.
So as we're kind of winding up towards the end, as you mentioned at the beginning, future game show host. That's how you would sign your name.
Yeah.
So for you growing up, who were some of those game show hosts that you like, my gosh, I love,
Bob Barker was the ultimate for me.
Gotcha.
Bob Barker was my idol. I now, as an adult, having been able to see the Match Game on Game Show Network and other places since then, I just think Gene Rayburn is fantastic. He's certainly my fashion icon. But Bob Barker, Gene Rayburn, I think that Tom Kennedy is underappreciated because Tom Kennedy's big show was Name That Tune, which does not get repeated because of music rights issues. So we sort of had the misfortune of not getting that second look on Game Show Network. Although he hosted Password Plus for a little while, he hosted Body Language, but he's a name that's kind of has been forgotten, but he was a really talented host. And I always loved...
Was he the one that was married to Betty White, too? Or no?
That's Alan Ludden, who was the host of Password.
Yes.
Don't apologize. That's another great name to bring up. I mean, Alan Ludden just did Password. He also did GE Quiz Bowl, I believe. But Password was his main thing. He really built his reputation on that one show, and he was perfect for that show. I mean, you have this guy who looks like he belongs on the cover of an oatmeal box, and he's so laconic and so dignified presiding over this silly word association game. He defined the tone of Password in such a nice way.
So, airing Thursday nights. AV Club on Fusion.
Yes.
30 episodes for the first season, correct?
That's right.
So as it gets done, how do you feel like from beginning of the season, as you're reaching up towards the end, how do you feel like this experience has been for you, and how has it changed you from during this whole first season?
We're about at the halfway point now. I was in tears the night that the first episode ran because I felt like I had kept a promise that I made to myself when I was like 4 years old to get a TV show someday. And the just thrill of having my own show, I won't say that it's worn off, but of course it has. Like, it's my workaday job now. It has, halfway through the season, I just kind of coast on the feeling of like, yeah, you can actually do this. Like, it's just been a thrill to find out, yeah, you can hold down a show and you can be presentable for 22 minutes every week on the air. And now I'm just really focused on how do we evolve the format and how do we evolve our production structure so that we're just getting the best and funniest 22 minutes we can each week. It's a constant challenge. It's trickier than you think putting together TV. There's 1,000 decisions that go into every half hour, and you just try to make the right ones and learn from your mistakes.
I can imagine this, as much of a challenge it could be, it also has to be a lot of fun when you're kind of discovering what your show is going to be.
Yeah, it's great. You discover things every week. You discover, hey, Fran's pretty funny on camera in this particular role, or what have you. You make little discoveries, and you're absolutely right. That is the joy of it, to find out what makes the show tick.
Are you much like an NFL coach at the end, kind of breaking down the game tape afterwards? Or are you like, all right, no, I don't need to rewatch it. Let's just move on to the next episode.
You're damn right I am. Yup. I am poring over that. Look, I'll have people tell me, hey, that was a great show this week. I loved this part, and I'll accept the compliment, and I love it. But I might at the same time be like, yeah, well, there's 100 things I could point out to you that I didn't love about that. But the football analogy is perfect. I think you knew I would love that, because you have to pick up each week and move right on to the next game. You don't have time to really wallow. You have time to learn, and you'd better learn from what happened last week, but you don't have time to wallow, and that's kind of nice too. You just have to move on to the next.
Do you feel if they did post-show interviews with hosts, would you be very Belichickian in your responses with reporters?
I am a Patriots fan, as you'd imagine. coming from New Hampshire, but no, I think I'd be more of a Pete Carroll type,
Okay.
more expansive and kind. Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if they want to keep up to date with you, John Teti, and
Yes.
all your various doings, I know the Instagram kind of a little.
Maybe like 3 times a year I post on my Instagram. I am on Twitter. You know, I'm so busy making the show, I'm not on any of these too much, but I am on Twitter regularly, and I do respond. If you reach out to me on Twitter, that's probably the best way to get at me.
Fantastic.
Oh, and it's at John Teti, JohnTeti. I should say that. That would help.
That's true. The show is the AV Club. It airs Thursday nights on Fusion. Please check it out. It is entertaining, as is the host of the show, John Teti. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me. This was a blast, and I love the Bumblebee microphones.
Oh, well, look at that. I had nothing to do with this, but I will accept that compliment on their behalf.
Thanks, Frank.
I'm Frank Moran. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HappyGoJackie. We'll see you back here with another guest as we do another episode of AfterBuzz TV Spotlight. Take care, everybody.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
See you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.